All right, let's continue on with our review and book discussion for An American Sickness by Elisabeth Rosenthal. This is again from Luigi's bookshelf, meaning that we believe that Luigi Mangione had recommended that we educate ourselves about books like this one, movies like Sicko from Michael Moore. We are now discussing Part 1, Chapter 1 of An American Sickness. If you like this format, we encourage you to buy a copy of the book, to follow along as you watch these YouTube videos, leave comments in the comment section below. Interact and engage with it. I will read all comments. Even if you leave the comment a year from now, I'll keep following up on comments and engage with the discussion. We could also do Discord discussions and such. So let's go ahead and jump into this. I'm going to jump ahead to where we're at in the book, which is Part 1. The history of the present illness and review of symptoms. So that's what we're going to go with right now. Now, I've already started reading this chapter. I've read this chapter. I've given highlights. I'm going to have to summarize as best as possible where these highlights come in. The first story that we get told about is a story about an individual who was getting treatments for a form of arthritis, I believe it was. And his treatments were costing a certain amount of money, $19,000 per visit, as we'll see. But then when the doctor moved to a clinic a few blocks away, the prices went through the roof. And the highlighted sections that we're going to talk about are right here. So we're talking about his history. Every 6 weeks, a drug called Remicade was infused into his veins. This is the patient we're talking about. In an outpatient clinic at Beth Israel Hospital where Dr. Rakoff practiced. The treatment cost $19,000 each visit. But Mr. Kivy, who is the person, this case study that we're looking at, as a New York civil servant, has excellent insurance under Emblem Health. He paid nothing himself. I want to point this out. This is the problem, I feel like one of the big problems in America with this whole health insurance concept, is that we have this mistaken belief and get told that because it doesn't cost you those huge numbers that you're seeing on a piece of paper, you shouldn't be worried about it. It's only going to be a $20 out-of-pocket copay for you, or you're only going to have a $3,000 out-of-pocket maximum for the year. So it doesn't really matter anymore what those numbers mean. That's what you will get told by the health insurance industry on a regular basis. Forget the numbers. It doesn't matter to you. All that you should be cared about, all you should care about is your individual portion, and it's not that much. So who cares if it's millions of dollars on the back end if you're only paying a $20 copay? That's all you need to be concerned about. And it sounds reasonable on the surface until one realizes that the out-of-control costs increase everyone's numbers that they list as the out-of-pocket maximum. That continues to go up. Premium costs continue to go up. Our cost of healthcare continues to go up because they keep telling you to ignore the big numbers. Ignore the big numbers. All that matters is the little amount you're paying. And yet, in time, those huge blow-ups on the back end are what causing our benefits to get more expensive for us every single year, and we get less and less coverage for the premiums that we pay. This is a big issue that we're going to continue to hit as we go along. Continuing on in the quotes in the book that I have highlighted. Then in 2013, Dr. Rakoff moved her practice about 15 blocks north to NYU Langone Medical Center. So again, what we're talking about is they're documenting a situation, this case study, where an individual was going to Dr. Rakoff for $19,000 treatments every time they had a treatment for their condition. And now the doctor moved just a few blocks away, 15 blocks away, to a different medical center. Same doctor, same patient, same treatment, but all they did is moved locations. And then it continues on in this next page over here. But the charges that started posting in his insurance at the insurance website as submitted by NYU shocked him. His first 3-hour infusion at the new hospital in May was billed at $98,575.98. This is for the same exact treatment that 15 blocks away cost him $19,000. Now all of a sudden, same doctor, everything else has stayed the same. The drug's the same, the doctor's the same. All that's happened is that doctor moved 15 blocks away to a different hospital, and now his $19,000 treatment has become $98,575.98. The second treatment he received in June was $110,410.82. And this from July on, after that, they increased even more to $132,791.04. It was the same dose as always, in the same form, prescribed by the same doctor. Already we should know that this is happening in the industry, and the question becomes, why do we tolerate this? How does this make any sense that the same doctor prescribing the same drug goes from $19,000 each time, which already is a ridiculous amount of money. $19,000 was ridiculous. Now the same doctor prescribing the same drug goes up 3 times in a row. $98,000 for a $19,000 treatment, $110,000 for a $19,000 treatment, $132,000 for a $19,000 treatment, and so on. When Mr. Kivy, this person who is, we're talking their case study, complained to NYU's billing office, a patient representative offered a range of non-explanations. This is their typical thing. They'll talk you into circles to tell you that you really shouldn't worry about it. In the end, she, the billing administrator, in the end, she said that I should pay no attention to how much money my insurance company is being forced to pay. After all, it's not costing me anything. So again, this is the game that they're playing in America. I don't know why you're so upset about how much your cost of healthcare is exploding. You're not paying anything more. Your coverage, you've got good coverage. Who cares what the insurance companies are forced to pay on that bill? It doesn't matter. In the end, you're still paying the same amount. Let it go. Let it go. So, the wholesale price of Dr. Kivy's dose of Remicade should only have been about $1,200, a drug researcher at another hospital told me. So again, this book is written by somebody who's well versed in the medical community. She's got contacts in the medical community, and she did some research on this drug Remicade, which originally was being charged $19,000 every time it was administered. Already I told you this cost was ridiculous. But the drug, according to what this doctor found out from talking to another drug researcher, is probably about $1,200. So let's not forget that the initial service for this individual was $19,000 for something that really costs about $1,200. Already it was ridiculous. And then they ballooned it to $132,000 for the same $1,000 drug. And again, the message that America keeps getting told is, why are you so upset about it? You don't pay that. So relax. Your insurance companies, your insurance coverage is paying for it. You're good. There's nothing to worry about. NYU Mangione, it turned out, had a financial interest in Remicade and potentially stands to profit each time the drug is used. So, on the back end, when all that big exploding money comes out, guess who benefits? NYU. So 15 blocks away, where they have more of a vested interest in making money off of the sale of that drug, all of a sudden the sale of that drug goes way up because they get a percentage of that sale. These are complex issues. I mean, even I am not a financial guy, but I can understand the motivation that's going on here. One hospital gets a kickback from the drug, and so when you go there, they just up the price of the drug and their kickback gets bigger, because they get a percentage of the sale. But there was a bigger shock for Mr. Kivy in this study that we're doing. Instead of taking issue with the price and securing deep discounts, the insurer came through with almost all the cash. In other words, he would expect that his insurance company is going to balk at an increase from $19,000 to $132,000, but they didn't. They came up with pretty much all the cash. And in fact, they bragged, I thought I had that highlighted. They bragged about how much they were covering of his charge. It's listed here and I didn't highlight it. Emblem Health paid $73,000 of your single infusion. And so it makes sense. Look at how much money we made for you. Emblem was shelling out $1 million a year to NYU Mangione for Mr. Kivy's treatments. And because he is a New York teacher, that means all residents were paying some share of their tax dollars. Why would an insurer pay such an exorbitant price for a drug? So in other words, what they're saying is, again, the taxpayers of New York are all being paying into the system that allows Mr. Kivy to get $1 million a year in treatments for something that probably should cost him about $3,000 a year in treatments. But while Mr. Kivy didn't see an increase in his premiums because it's covered by insurance, the taxpayers are paying more and more tax money to pay for Mr. Kivy's treatments. And the problem isn't Mr. Kivy. Mr. Kivy's not the one you should be mad about because I have to pay Mr. Kivy's bills. The problem is the people telling Mr. Kivy, don't worry about it. We got you covered. The taxpayers of New York will pay your bill. We'll just keep increasing their taxes and taking more of their money. You're good. It's not Kivy's problem. He just wants to get his his coverage. But this is the shell game that we play, always shifting where the money's coming from so that you don't know who to blame and how to take care of the problem. This chapter was giving a history of insurance, and it gets a little complicated and a little detailed, but basically it was talking about before World War II, our insurance industry, the way we understand it, didn't really exist. The earliest health insurance policies, according to this quote, were designed primarily to compensate for income that was lost when workers were ill. Insurance wasn't initially put in place to cover your hospital bill. It was to cover your lost pay because you're out of work. And so that was what the first policies were basically created for. I highlighted in blue a sentence right next to it that I thought deserved its own thought process. Long absences were a big problem for companies that depended on manual labor. So again, this is what the insurance was actually originally created for, not to cover your hospital bill, but to cover your loss of income and your loss from the employer when you're out working the field. This is why there's a point in the documentary that Luigi Mangione, in the last documentary, Who is Luigi Mangione, was coaching someone on how to get their medical bills covered. And what Luigi Mangione allegedly said, writing as Mr. Cactus, I believe it was, from Reddit, was, look, you've got to explain it to them in terms they can understand. Tell them that you are not able to work. You're not able to go to work if you don't have this surgery, if you don't get your stuff taken care of, because that's what they're interested in, is you being a worker and not being out of the workforce. If you tell them that you have debilitating pain or that your quality of life is less, they give zero shits. They do not care about your pain. So to play the game of insurance, you must tell them that you are not going to be a productive worker making money to pay the bills that they're affording. That's where they're listening. Oh, you can't pay our bills if you're not working? Well, shit. We got to make sure we get your money, so you need to get back to the workforce as quickly as possible. I don't care if you are in pain. Get your ass back to work is the message. Continuing on. The goal was not to make money, but to protect patient savings. This is talking about the history of Blue Cross Blue Shield. When Blue Cross Blue Shield was like the first insurance in the country. And it was designed in America, again, to be a non-profit organization to cover lost wages, essentially. And the goal was not to make money. That was not Blue Cross's purpose. It was not to make money, but to protect patient savings and keep hospitals and charitable religious groups, etc., that funded them afloat. Blue Cross plans were then not for profit. This changed and it led to the epidemic we have in America. So let's continue on. When the National War Labor Board froze salaries during and after World War II, companies facing severe labor shortages discovered that they would attract workers by offering health insurance instead. So they couldn't raise your salary because there was a freeze on salaries, right? And so the answer was benefits. So you can work for company A or company B, and the max salary is this. So the only thing that we can now offer you to make you work for company B instead of company A is we have better benefits. We'll give you insurance. We'll do this. So this is a shift in America where it became, once the wages got stabilized, it was like, oh, well then it's not about how much money you get paid. It's also how good the benefit package is. Most people who live in America know this is exactly the case. Sorry that I just fumbled my microphone, and I don't know that I'm going to edit that out. These are kind of on the fly, on the cuff book reports, right? So the point being is that this is the way it exists today. It's not just how much you make an hour, but what your benefit package is. And so this started shortly after World War II. The original purpose of health insurance, it continues to say, was to mitigate financial disaster brought about by a serious illness, such as losing your home or your job, but it was never intended to make health care cheap or to serve as a tool for cost control. Our expectations about what insurance should do have grown. Again, the point being is that originally the insurance was just to protect loss of income because you're in the hospital and you can't work and be a productive member of society. It wasn't to cover your hospital bill. It wasn't to make your hospital bill more affordable. It was to make sure that you could stay working and that you didn't go bankrupt from being in the hospital. Between 1940 and 1955, we're going on to another quote up here now, the number of Americans with health insurance skyrocketed from 10% to over 60%. So by the 1950s, over half of Americans now had health insurance. It was started out very small, 10%. When Blue Cross Blue Shield first started, a handful of people had it. Then by 1950s, over half of Americans had health insurance. Blues, the Blue Shield, Blue Cross, were nonprofit and accepted everyone who sought to sign up. All members were charged the same price, and no matter how old or how sick you were. This is also what led to the problem in America, is that other companies for profit came in and said, well, if we didn't have to insure a bunch of old people or a bunch of sick people, we could make it cheaper for the people who are relatively healthy. And so they started to market this idea of, hey, look, we're in this for business. You could put yourself in a pool of people who are healthier, and you don't have to fund the sick old bastard or the person who has terminal cancer that's eating all your costs alive. So we'll make small pockets of people where it's only healthy people who are paying, and you aren't absorbing the cost of all the sick people. So, continuing on. For-profit insurance companies moved in at that point. So for-profit insurance companies moved in and unencumbered by the Blues charitable mission, they accepted only the youngest, healthier patients on whom they could make profit. They charged different rates depending on factors like your age, how long, or as they had long done before with life insurance. And they produced different types of policies for different amounts of money, which provided different levels of protection. So again, here comes in the new modern way to do things in America, which is that if you are at a higher risk, you're going to pay more money. So the Blue Cross Blue Shield is everyone pays exactly the same price, and the costs are spread up amongst everybody, which means, quote unquote, unfairly in the American mindset, people who are healthy and probably will never spend a day in the hospital their entire life are paying for the protection and the benefits of people who are sick all the time. And so they would justify, you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to pay for people who are sick when you're a healthy person. So let's lump you in with healthy people and charge you a different rate, a cheaper rate, because you're not funding all the sick people in the world. So with aggressive marketing and closer ties to business than to healthcare, the for-profit plans slowly gained market share throughout the 1970s and 1980s. It was difficult for Blue Cross or the Blues to compete. So now as we've gotten into the business of health, and insurance companies are saying, let's take on healthy young individuals and charge them a cheaper rate than all the sick people. And the Blues were forced to cover everyone, regardless of your age and whatever. The Blues couldn't keep up, because the Blues now all of a sudden had a more and more depleted young healthy generation to offset the cost of the sick people, and all those young people were going over to the for-profit plans, saving them money by making the Blues have nothing but more and more increasingly sick people, which was bankrupting their system. By the 1990s, the Blues, which offered insurance in all 50 states, were hemorrhaging money and having been left to cover the sickest of patients. So we understand why this is happening. In 1994, after state directors rebelled, the Blues board relented and allowed member plans to become for-profit insurances. So in 1994, Blue Cross Blue Shield basically realized that they couldn't continue their model of providing the same cost of coverage for everyone and be nonprofit. They had to change. They were going to go bankrupt. They were going to be out of business. They had to go along with the new business model of doing it for money, because they can't keep affording to pay for all the sick while the young people move over to cheaper plans with for-profit companies. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of California were particularly aggressive. So when the Blues allowed independent Blues to start acting for profit, the California Blue companies became particularly aggressive, gobbling up its fellow Blues in a dozen of other states, renaming itself to WellPoint, and it is the largest or the biggest of the for-profit companies descended from the original nonprofit Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. Today, it is the second largest insurer in the United States. Most of the plans still operate under the name of Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. In New York, the plans are called Emblem brand. So you've heard, probably a lot of you have heard of Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. This is the for-profit emergence of Blue Cross Blue Shield, where they're going to make money now. And so Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and also known as Emblem in New York. And again, this story of Mr. Kivy, who we've been talking about, is from Emblem, New York. I hope this doesn't bore the living shit out of you. I understand that there's talking about people's individual things can be boring and in the weeds. Even I don't like to talk about case studies a million days a week. But it's the bigger issue. We have to get ourselves educated on the history of how insurance got out of control and how it's about profits and not people, so that we can understand how to break that system and how to fix the system. And ultimately, we have to ask ourselves the question as well: did Luigi Mangione do something to try to break this system, to create a national dialogue, to help wake up the American population about how bad our healthcare system is in the United States, and it urged us to have a revolution of sorts? If so, we should have that conversation. WellPoint's first priority appears no longer to be its patients or members, or even the companies and unions that chose it as its insurer, but instead its shareholders and investors. So when Blue Cross became for profit, they no longer cared. This is the obvious conclusion. They no longer cared about their patients or their members. They cared about making money for their shareholders. As in any for-profit enterprise, executives are compensated for how well they perform that financial function and are compensated well. This leads to the Brian Thompson United Healthcare CEO situation directly. Brian Thompson's salary was increasing and increasing and increasing prior to his murder in New York. And allegedly it was because United Healthcare also at the same time was increasing the amount of claims that it was denying for people. So they were continuing to deny more and more coverage for people, therefore making United Healthcare more and more profitable to the shareholders. Therefore, the shareholders could afford to pay Brian Thompson more and more money in salary for a job well done. You're making all of us big money. Deny claims for people. Don't worry about their health care. You need to worry about the shareholders and making us money, and we'll pay you very well for it. So for those who maintain this idea that Luigi Mangione, if he is the person who committed the crime against Brian Thompson, is a coward shooting an innocent man who had nothing to do with anything, this book is railing against that very concept. Brian Thompson profited because he helped lead his company to higher and higher denials, giving people less and less quality of care so that the shareholders made more and more money. I do not call that innocent. Some of you may still call that innocent. Well, it's not entirely his fault. He didn't deny everybody individually. It's not like I called up and Brian Thompson said I can't get covered. It's just a system, man. Okay, I'm on a rant. I think we don't have too much further to go to finish up on chapter 1, part 1. In 1993, before the Blues went for for-profit, insurers spent 95 cents of every dollar of the premiums on medical care. I want to make sure I explain what this means, because it gets a little complex on the numbers. That means for every dollar that you spend on your health care, 95 cents of that dollar went to paying for your healthcare coverage and costs, and 5% of it went to administrative stuff like paying CEOs and healthcare professionals that run the insurance company, and maybe advertising of, hey, you should join our insurance company. 95% or 95 cents on the dollar went to your care, and 5% went to administrative costs. And they call this, according to this paragraph, I'm kind of like summarizing the paragraph as I'm reading it to you, is called the medical loss ratio. The increase, to increase profits, all insurers, regardless of their tax status, have been spending less on care in recent years and more on activities like marketing, lobbying, administration, and the payout of dividends to its shareholders. The average medical loss ratio is now closer to 80%. Okay, doesn't sound terrible yet, but it's still bad. What that means is every time you spend $1 on your health care, 80 cents of it goes to paying for your medical coverage, and 20 cents of the dollar you spent goes to paying CEOs, shareholders, administrative costs, marketing to make them more profitable in the future. So now all of a sudden, instead of only 5 cents on the dollar going to those things, now 20 cents on your dollar is going, which means your care is getting less. You're only getting 80 cents coverage for your dollar that you spent instead of 95 cents coverage. Doesn't sound like a huge number, but it is when you get the math going, and we'll continue on with that. The medical loss ratio, as an example, for Texas Blue Shield, or the Blues, the Texas Blue Cross Blue Shield. The medical loss ratio for Texas, where the whole concept of health insurance started, is now just 64.4% in 2010. Let me explain that. That means for every dollar in the Texas Blue Shield program that you spend on your health care, 64 cents goes to your care. And the other 45 cents plus goes to, or 35 plus, goes to administrative costs and CEO salaries and so on. So now you see it's just getting worse and worse. Every dollar you spend in healthcare, you're getting less and less money going to your actual care, and more going to the shareholders, the stakeholders, the advertising cost to make it more promoted so that they can get more people into the system and make more money and more money, all that good stuff. The framers of the Affordable Care Act, so this is something that took place, tried to, legislation was passed, the Affordable Care Act. Framers of the Affordable Care Act tried to curb the insurance profits and their executives' salaries, like Brian Thompson, who made enormous amounts of money as being rewarded for denying care and making shareholders more and more money. The Affordable Care Act tried to curb insurance profits and executive salaries, which were some of the highest in the U.S. healthcare industry, by forcing them to spend 80 to 85% of every premium dollar on patient care. So in other words, we were getting to the point now where Texas Blues were only giving you 64 cents of your dollar that you spent for your care and the rest for administrative. Now a law comes in, the Affordable Care Act, and they're trying to force insurance to, you have to at least let people have 80 to 85% of every dollar that they're giving you towards their care, instead of paying higher and higher salaries for your shareholders and your CEOs. And the insurance companies fought bitterly against that provision because they want to make profit for their shareholders, their stakeholders, and their company as a for-profit, and they don't care about whether or not you're getting less and less coverage to make them more and more profit. Medicare, by the way, and this was another quote down here, uses 98% of its funding for healthcare and only 2% for administrative costs. So the government system that many say government officials are trying to do away with, try to get rid of Medicare. Let's get rid of that Medicare system, because the Medicare system actually gives you 98 cents of your dollar back towards your care and only 2% for the shareholders, for the administrative costs. And so therefore, the big business wants to get rid of Medicare, because you can't pay a CEO the kind of money that you're paying them if you're only getting 2% of every dollar, or 2 cents on every dollar. Second, now that they suddenly have to use 80 to 85% rather than say 75% of the premiums on patient care, this was after the Affordable Care Act came in, so now that they're forced to pay a higher level of your money back to you, okay, insurance now have a perverse motivation to tolerate huge explosion of your expenses, of the cost of your medical care, such as big payouts, in order to make sure that their 15% take. So if they have to give you 85% of your dollar back to your healthcare costs, and they only get to keep 15% of that, the only way they make more money is by raising the costs exponentially. So that 15% of millions of dollars is worth something more than 15% of $100. It's just pure economics. So if you cap the insurance companies to say you're only allowed to make 15% of a person's money that they pay to you in profit, then the answer is, well, just raise the costs. So that 15% of $1 million is worth now enough money to pay our CEOs and our time. This is why your healthcare costs continue to go up, and the insurance companies tell you, don't worry about it. You're covered. Who cares how much the back end costs are getting up? To cover the shortfalls, premiums are increased next year, passing the cost on to the consumers. So again, what I'm saying is, this is the game we play. We keep exploding the costs on the back end. It gets more and more expensive for insurance companies, and therefore, and that's got to stop. I'm sorry about that. And I'm not going to re-record this audio, but I am going to unplug my ding bell. Oh my gosh. So sorry about that. I wish I could edit that out. It's a long story about why I have a caregiver bell at my place, but I keep forgetting to plug it during a recording. So I apologize. Anyways, so again, as the costs keep going up on the back end, so every year your cost, your premiums are going to go up as a person who's paying for healthcare. This is why every single year all of us bitch that every single year when it comes time for our renewal of benefits at our companies, we say, wow, it's costing us more money this year than it did last, and I have less coverage. The house is going to hell in a handbasket. Now I got dogs in the background barking while I'm trying to finish this thing. We're almost at the end, so we're just going to push through, and I apologize for the audio issues. Continuing on the quote. In fact, history shows that once a procedure is covered by insurance, its sticker price generally goes up because patients are largely insulated from the cost. What that means is the very thing that we've been talking about from the beginning. Once a person says, hey, my copay is $20 and that's it, I don't really care if the doctor's visit was $300, $3,000, or $300,000. You can put whatever number you want on it. If I only had to pay $20, it's $20 to me. Who gives a shit what's on the back end? This logic, this flaw in our American logic is causing us enormous nightmares because we don't realize that money's coming somewhere. There's going to be a decrease in what those insurance companies will cover for us so that they have to pay less and less to us when we have to pay, and they'll have to increase the amount of money we give them to get our piddly amount of coverage. It's a snowball effect, and we think it's not happening because, well, I only have a $20 copay. I only have a $3,000 out-of-pocket maximum. I believe we're at the end of the chapter coming up here, so maybe you're thankful with all the stuff that we've had on. Explanation of benefit statements. Most of us in America are familiar with an EOB statement, an explanation of benefits. Explanation of benefit statements tout how much the insurance has saved you. We saved you 96%, crowed Cigna about an overpriced one-night hospital stay at NYU Langone. A calculation explained like this: of the hospital's $99,000 bill, not including doctor's fees, Cigna paid its negotiated discounted rate of $68,000, and the patient only had to contribute $3,000. So you're thinking, wow, man, they covered $68,000 of my $99,000 bill because they renegotiated the $99,000 down to $68,000, and I only had to pay $3,000 of it, and they paid the rest. This is amazing. I love insurance. It's a shell game. It should have never cost that much money in the first place. Anyways, once acceptance of health insurance was once acceptance of health insurance was widespread, a domino effect ensued. Hospitals adopted to the financial incentives, which changed how doctors practiced medicine, which revolutionized the types of drugs and devices that manufacturers made and marketed, and the money chase was on. No one was protecting patients. Everything became about how to make hospitals more affordable and more efficient for business, so that when they charge you this big, huge, bloated price, less of it's needed to actually take care of your care, and more of that bloated price can go into the profits and the shareholders and the stakeholders' pockets. So again, I realize that this is dry to many of you, but I just feel like it's a conversation we need to have in America. I feel like it's one that is being missed when we're talking about Luigi Mangione and whether he shot an innocent man in the back like a coward. If that's what people are going to maintain, we have to ask ourselves: Is the Brian Thompsons of the world, is the CEOs of the world who are being paid more and more money because they're denying more and more coverage for you and making healthcare less and less effective for you, so that their shareholders can make more money, and therefore they can get praised with higher and higher salaries so they can buy their second and third and fourth home and send their kids to Ivy League schools and buy a vacation yacht? And also, is all of that acceptable and makes the person innocent because Brian Thompson didn't directly deny your claim? And I don't mean to make this entirely about Brian Thompson. The reason I'm doing that is a couple reasons. One, because this is the Luigi bookshelf, and you're here primarily because you're interested in Luigi Mangione. So I want to make sure that this book discussion keeps Luigi Mangione in the forefront, and we talk about him on a regular basis to keep you engaged in the book and the bigger conversation, because a lot of you are really more interested in Luigi Mangione and understanding what was going through Luigi Mangione's head if he did the things that he did. But I want us to push towards having that bigger conversation about what's broken in America and what we need to do to fix our system. And so that's the attempt of this thing, is to do both. I want to encourage us. I believe that Luigi Mangione, if he really did mention Rosenthal's book, which we're studying, I want to encourage us to have the dialogue that maybe Luigi himself wants us to have. Maybe it's possible Luigi Mangione himself would rather us spend less time talking about how hot he is and more time talking about what the hell we're going to do to finally stop this broken system and into this bullshit. So with that, I'm asking you to have a good day. Please buy a copy of this book if you haven't done so already. Follow this series. Engage in this book. We're going to have other books, I believe, that we'll pull out of Luigi's bookshelf that also I think were recommended by him, or at least inform the discussion of what may have happened if Luigi Mangione shot Brian Thompson. Again, let's not forget that Luigi Mangione is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. By the time you watch this video, the court case may be over. Who knows? This could be up on YouTube for years, and maybe Luigi Mangione was found guilty. Maybe he wasn't found guilty. That's the weird thing about this whole thing, is this show's recorded where I don't know how it's going to end up, but the video could stay out there long enough for you to know how it all ended up. We're just watching it live. So stay with us, buy a copy of this book, continue on with chapter 2 in our next video. Thanks for sharing.